A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. The Forbidden Name. The stone floor of the great hall was cold beneath Clara Winter's knees. Rough hands had dragged her through corridors that twisted deep within the castle's heart, past tapestries depicting ancient battles between shifter packs, past torches that cast dancing shadows on walls thick enough to withstand siege. Her bare knees scraped against the unforgiving surface. Now she knelt before the throne, wrists bound with iron chains that bit into her skin with every movement, her 23 years of survival instinct screaming that this was the end. She could smell the fear radiating from her own body, sharp and acrid, mixing with the scent of burning pitch and cold stone. She could feel her wolf cowering somewhere deep inside, whimpering, knowing that in this hall, before this man, there would be no escape. The Omega in her recognized the overwhelming power of the Alpha King, seated above her on his throne of black stone, carved from a single massive block quarried from the northern mountains. Artur. Even his name carried weight in the shifter world. 35 years of life had carved him into something more than a man, more than a simple alpha. He was the authority that commanded every pack in the kingdom, the ultimate power that settled disputes between rival alphas, the law itself made flesh and blood. His black hair fell past his shoulders, unbound in the way of warrior kings who needed no crown, and his golden eyes held all the warmth of a winter storm. A vertical scar cut through his right eyebrow, stark white against tanned skin. Today, he sat above her untouchable and absolute, radiating power that made weaker wolves bare their throats in submission. Clara forced herself not to look away. If death was coming, she would meet it with dignity. Clara Winters, the voice belonged to Lady Philippa, who stood at the king's right hand. Her blonde hair was woven into elaborate braids adorned with thin silver chains that caught the torchlight. Her face was beautiful in the way of sharp things, and her smile never reached her pale blue eyes. You stand accused of trespassing in the forbidden archives of the North Tower, of attempting to steal sacred relics belonging to the crown, of espionage on behalf of rival packs who would see our kingdom fall. Clara's throat was dry. She had expected arrest when the guards found her in that dusty room, surrounded by ancient records and forgotten histories. She had not expected this. Not a public trial in the king's own hall. Not charges that carried death. What say you? Artur's voice rolled through the chamber. It was not loud, but every shifter present felt the command in those words. The absolute authority of the strongest alpha in 5 generations. Clara lifted her chin. I was searching for information about my own bloodline, Your Majesty. About my grandmother's line. I meant no harm to the crown. Your family? Philippa's laugh was cutting. You have no family, girl. Your pack cast you out years ago. You are nothing. A wanderer. An Omega without protection or purpose. The words struck true. Each one a knife finding its mark. Clara had been 16 when her pack discovered her gift. 16 when her father looked at her with disgust, called her unnatural. 16 when they threw her beyond their borders and told her never to return. 7 years of drifting from place to place, hiding what she was, working in taverns and stables, sleeping in barns or forests, trying to survive in a world that had no mercy for outcasts. Even so, Clara said, forcing strength into her voice, I have the right to know where I came from. You have no rights here. Godric spoke from the king's left side, arms crossed over his broad chest. The beta was 40 years old, his hair graying at the temples, his brown eyes severe. He wore the insignia of his rank, a silver wolf's head pinned to his dark tunic. You violated sacred space. The archives are forbidden to all but the king's chosen. The penalty is death. There are no exceptions. Death. The word hung heavy between them. Clara felt her wolf whimper, felt her heart hammer against her ribs, but she had not survived this long to give up without fighting. Her hand moved to her pocket, fingers closing around the small object she had found hidden among the dusty records. A silver medallion, delicate and old, its surface tarnished with years, engraved with symbols she did not recognize. She had touched it without thinking, drawn by instinct, and the vision had struck her consciousness with the force of a blow. A young woman with long red hair that fell in waves, eyes the color of emeralds with flecks of gold, pale skin dotted with freckles. Dying slowly, poison burning through her veins while she gasped for breath, whispering a name with her last breath. "I found something," Clara said. "In the archives, hidden. Something that changes everything." Archer leaned forward slightly. The first movement he had made. Torchlight caught the sharp planes of his face. "Speak plainly, Omega. My patience wears thin." Clara pulled the medallion from her pocket with trembling fingers, holding it up so torchlight caught the tarnished silver. Several nobles gasped. Philippa's face went perfectly still, frozen. "I have a gift," Clara said, forcing words past fear. "I can see memories through objects, through touch. Images imprinted on metal and stone by those who held them in moments of great emotion. It is why my pack rejected me. They called it witchcraft. But it is what I am. A seer. When I touched this medallion, I saw her. I saw how she truly died." "Enough!" Philippa snapped, composure cracking. "The girl is delusional, Your Majesty. Mad from years alone. She seeks to manipulate this court with lies." But Archer raised one hand, and silence fell absolute. His golden eyes fixed on Clara, burning with intensity that made her want to look away. She forced herself to meet his gaze, to hold that terrible stare even as her wolf whimpered. "Saw who?" His voice had gone dangerously quiet. Clara took a breath. This was the moment. If she was wrong, she would die. If she was right, she might still die. But the truth would be spoken. "Isolde," she whispered. The effect was instantaneous. Artur surged to his feet, his aura exploding outward with such force that half the nobles took involuntary steps backward. The temperature seemed to drop. Torches flickered. Even Godric looked shaken, his hand moving to his sword. "How do you know that name?" Artur's voice was no longer human. It carried the growl of his wolf, the fury of 15 years of buried grief. "How dare you speak it in this hall?" Clara's chains rattled as she trembled, but she kept her eyes on his. "Because I saw her die, Your Majesty. I saw the poison in her veins. I saw her alone in that tower, knowing she had been betrayed by those she trusted. I saw everything, and I know the truth about what happened to your mate." The silence was absolute. No one in the kingdom spoke of Isolde. The name had been forbidden since her death 15 years ago, when the young Alpha King lost the only person who had touched his heart. The official story was illness, a fever that took her quickly, a tragedy that turned Artur from a passionate ruler into the cold, merciless king before them. But Clara had seen the truth, and she could see in his eyes, in how his jaw clenched and his hands trembled with rage, that he knew she was not lying. "Guards," Artur said, voice rough. "Take her to the dungeons, the deep cells. No one is to touch her. No one is to question her. She speaks to no one but me." He turned his gaze to Philippa. "Summon Godric to my chambers. We ride north at first light. Prepare provisions for 4 days, and my personal guard." As guards hauled Clara to her feet, she caught one last glimpse of Lady Philippa's face. For just a moment, beneath the carefully constructed mask, Clara saw something that made her blood run cold. Fear. Pure fear in the eyes of the king's most trusted advisor. The medallion slipped from Clara's fingers as they dragged her away, clattering against stone and spinning until it rested at Godric's feet. But she had done what she came to do. She had spoken the forbidden name in the one place where it mattered most. And somewhere in the darkness of the castle dungeons, chained to a wall in a cell that had held traitors and murderers, Clara Winters waited through the long night to discover if truth would save her or condemn her to the executioner's blade. Chapter 2. Visions and Truths. The dungeon cell smelled of damp stone and old misery. Clara sat with her back against the cold wall, chains still binding her wrists, the iron heavy enough that she could barely lift her arms. A single torch burned in the corridor beyond the iron bars, casting flickering shadows that danced across the rough walls. She had been here for hours, maybe longer. Time moved strangely in the darkness, stretched thin by fear and exhaustion. She closed her eyes and let herself remember. She had been 16 the first time the vision came. It was at a funeral. the mate of one of her pack's warriors who had fallen in a border skirmish. Clara had gone to pay respects, as all pack members did, and the widow had taken her hand in gratitude. The moment their skin touched, the world had tilted sideways, blood on snow. The warrior's final moments, an ambush in the forest, a blade through his ribs, his last thought for his mate, for the child she carried. Then darkness. Clara had gasped and pulled away, stumbling backward, and the widow's face had transformed from grief to horror, because Clara had spoken aloud what she saw, had described the ambush in detail, the faces of the attackers, the way her mate had called the widow's name with his dying breath. Within a day, the whispers started. Witchcraft. Dark magic. Unnatural. Her father, a respected hunter in the pack, had looked at her with disgust. Her mother had wept. And the Alpha had made his judgment clear: leave or be executed for bringing evil into their territory. She had left before dawn, 16 years old, with nothing but the clothes she wore and the knowledge that her own blood had rejected her. The sound of boots on stone pulled her from the memory. Clara opened her eyes as torchlight grew brighter. 2 figures approached her cell. Arthur, no longer on his throne but somehow even more intimidating in the confined space of the dungeon corridor, and Godric, his hand resting on his sword hilt, his expression unreadable. A guard unlocked the cell door, and both men entered. The space felt suddenly smaller, the air thick with the Alpha King's power. Clara pushed herself to her feet, her chains clinking, and forced herself to meet Arthur's gaze. "Explain," Arthur said. His voice was controlled now, the rage from the great hall banked but not extinguished. "Everything. How you came to be in those archives. How you found that medallion. And how you know what you claim to know about Isolde." Clara took a breath, steadying herself. If she was going to die, let it be for speaking truth. "I came to the capital 3 weeks ago. I had heard that the royal archives contained records of old bloodlines, families whose gifts mark them as different. I thought perhaps I could find information about my grandmother. She was said to have the sight, though she died before I was born. And you thought breaking into forbidden chambers was acceptable." Godric's voice was hard. "I thought," Clara said quietly, "that understanding where I came from might help me understand what I am. Why I was cursed with this ability." "It is not a curse," Arthur said, surprising her. "Perhaps the curse was never yours, Clara. Perhaps it belonged to those who feared what they could not understand. My great-grandmother had the sight. She saved many lives with her visions, warned of attacks before they came. The gift runs in certain bloodlines, ancient ones. It is rare, but not evil." Clara stared at him, something tight loosening in her chest. In 7 years, no one had called her gift anything but a curse. "The archives," Arthur prompted. "I found a way in through a servant's passage," Clara continued. "I searched for 3 nights. Most of the records were about battles, treaties, land disputes. But yesterday, in the oldest section, I found a wooden box tucked into a crack in the stone wall. It was hidden deliberately, not filed with the other documents." "And inside?" Godric asked. "The medallion, nothing else. The moment I touched it, the vision took me." Clara closed her eyes, remembering. "I saw her. Red hair like autumn leaves, green eyes with gold flecks. She was in a stone room, a tower, I think, very high up. She was sick, weak, struggling to breathe. But it was not illness. I could feel the poison burning through her veins, taste the bitterness of it on her tongue." Arthur's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Clara continued, her voice soft. "She knew she was dying, knew she had been betrayed. She pulled the medallion from her neck with shaking hands and hid it in a crack in the wall. She whispered a prayer that someone with the sight would find it, would see the truth, and then she spoke a name as her vision faded. Your name, Your Majesty. She died alone, calling for you." The silence that followed was suffocating. Arthur turned away, his hands fisting at his sides. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Describe her, exactly." "Red hair that fell in waves past her shoulders," Clara said immediately. "Eyes like emeralds with flecks of gold that caught the light. Freckles across her nose and cheeks. pale skin. She was young, maybe 18. There was a small scar on her left wrist, white and thin, shaped almost like a crescent moon. Arthur's breath caught. He turned to face her, his golden eyes burning. How could you possibly know about that scar? We never spoke of it publicly. She got it climbing a tree as a child, falling and catching her wrist on a branch. Because I saw it in the vision, Clara whispered, and because she wore a necklace. Amber beads on a silver chain. She touched it often, whenever she was nervous or scared. Goddess above, Godric breathed. She is telling the truth. Arthur moved closer to Clara, and she fought the urge to step back. Up close, his power was overwhelming, his scent of pine and winter storms filling her lungs. The official story is that Isolde died of a fever, that I had sent her to a tower in the north to recover, away from the pressures of court, that she passed peacefully in her sleep. That is a lie, Clara said quietly. She was poisoned, deliberately, by someone who wanted her dead. Do you know who? The question was barely controlled. Clara shook her head. The vision only showed me her death, not who gave her the poison, or why. But she knew. In her final moments, she knew she had been betrayed by people she trusted. Arthur was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Godric. You remember how she died? The messenger who brought word. The sealed coffin I was not permitted to see her in, for fear of contagion. I remember, Godric said grimly. I thought it strange at the time. But you were mad with grief. None of us questioned. I should have questioned. Arthur's voice was filled with bitter self-recrimination. I should have demanded to see her, fever or no fever. I should have known. He turned back to Clara. You said you saw a tower. Can you describe it? The location? Clara closed her eyes, pulling up the memory of the vision. Stone walls, very thick. A single window looking north over forest. The room was circular, built into the top of a tower. I could see mountains in the distance through the window. And there was cold, bitter cold. Even inside the room. The Shadowlands, Godric said immediately. The old watchtower near the northern border. It has been abandoned for years, forbidden territory since Isolde died there. Arthur finished. His eyes met Clara's. That is where the medallion showed you. That is where she was murdered. Clara nodded. Arthur studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he made a decision. You will come with us, to the tower. You will go to the place where she died, and you will use your gift to see more. To see everything. Your Majesty, Godric said carefully. If she is lying, if this is some elaborate trick, it is not, Arthur said flatly. No one alive knows the details she described. No one but me. He looked at Clara, and there was something dangerous in his gaze. But understand this, Omega. If you are playing me false, if you are manipulating me with parlor tricks and lucky guesses, your death will not be quick. I will make you suffer in ways you cannot imagine. Do you understand? Clara lifted her chin. I understand, Your Majesty, and I am not lying. I wish I were. This gift has brought me nothing but pain and exile. But it is what I am, and I saw what I saw. Arthur nodded slowly. We leave at dawn. Godric, have the guards bring her to the upper chambers. Give her food, clean clothes, and a room with a lock on the outside. She is not a guest, but she is no longer to be treated as a common prisoner. As you command, Godric said. As they turned to leave, Clara found her voice. Your Majesty, the medallion. May I see it again? Arthur paused, then pulled the silver piece from his pocket. He had retrieved it from the great hall. He held it out, and Clara reached for it with her chained hands. The moment her fingers brushed the metal, the vision flashed again. Isolde's face, pale and beautiful, even in death. Her green eyes fixed on something Clara could not see. And words, whispered so faintly Clara almost missed them. Tell him I loved him. Tell him about the child. Clara gasped and pulled back, the vision releasing her. She stared at Arthur, her heart hammering. She wanted you to know she loved you, even at the end. That was her last thought. Something in Arthur's expression cracked, just for a moment. Then the mask slammed back into place. "Get her upstairs," he said to Godric, his voice rough. "We ride north at first light." And as Clara was led from the cell, her chains finally removed, her wrists raw and aching, she wondered what other secrets the tower in the Shadowlands would reveal, what other truths had died with Isolde that night, 15 years ago, the truth that might save Clara's life, or condemn them all. Chapter 3. Journey. North dawn broke cold and gray over the castle courtyard. Clara stood near the stables, wrapped in a cloak that was too large for her, borrowed from the servants' quarters. Her wrists still bore red marks from the chains, but clean bandages now covered them. She had eaten her first real meal in weeks the night before, slept in a bed with clean linens, and woken to find traveling clothes laid out for her, practical wool and leather, sturdy boots. 8 horses waited in the courtyard, their breath misting in the cold air. 6 guards in the king's colors, their armor polished, weapons at their sides. Godric checking saddles and provisions, and Arthur, standing apart from the others, his black hair pulled back, his golden eyes fixed on the northern horizon. He had not spoken to Clara since the dungeon. A stable hand brought her a horse, a gentle mare with kind eyes. Clara took the reins, grateful. She mounted carefully, settling into the saddle, and the mare shifted beneath her. Arthur swung onto his own mount, a massive black stallion that tossed its head and stamped. "We ride hard," he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. 4 days to the Shadowlands if we push. No unnecessary stops. We sleep rough and eat in the saddle. Anyone who cannot keep pace will be left behind. His eyes flicked to Clara for just a moment. A challenge in that gaze. She lifted her chin. She had survived 7 years alone. She would survive this. They rode out as the sun climbed higher, passing through the castle gates and into the city beyond. Merchants setting up their stalls, children running through streets, shifters of all ranks going about their routines. Some stopped to watch the Alpha King pass, bowing their heads. Others barely glanced up, too consumed with survival to care about royal business. They left the city behind by midday, following a road that cut north through farmland and forest. The pace Arthur set was punishing. The horses ran when the ground was clear, slowed to a fast walk when terrain grew rough. Clara's thighs burned, her back ached, but she gritted her teeth and kept up. The guards watched her with curiosity and suspicion, but said nothing. They stopped briefly at midday to water the horses at a stream. Clara dismounted carefully, her legs nearly giving out. She knelt by the water, splashing her face, drinking deeply. The cold shocked her system, but helped clear the fog of exhaustion. "You ride well for an Omega." Godric's voice made her turn. The Beta stood nearby, his expression measuring. "Where did you learn?" "Various places," Clara said carefully. "When you travel alone, you learn many things, or you die." 7 years of wandering, Godric said. "That is a long time to survive without a pack." "Yes," Clara agreed quietly. "And now you find yourself traveling with the Alpha King, hunting for truth about a murder 15 years old." Godric's brown eyes were sharp. "You must wonder if you would have been better off staying in the shadows." Clara looked at him directly. "Every day since I was 16 I have wondered if I would have been better off dying in my home pack. But I did not die. I survived. And if my gift can finally serve some purpose beyond bringing me pain, then perhaps there was a reason I lived this long." Godric studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "If you are lying to him, I will kill you myself. But if you are telling the truth, if you can give him closure about Isolde, then you have my protection. Thank you," Clara said, surprised. "Mount up." Arthur's voice cut through the clearing. "We move." They rode until sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and red. When they finally stopped, Clara slid from her horse and had to catch herself against the mare's side, her legs shaking. One of the guards took her reins wordlessly. They made camp in a clearing surrounded by pine trees. The guards worked with smooth coordination, building a fire, unpacking provisions, setting watch. Clara sank onto a fallen log, too exhausted to help, too aware they would not welcome her assistance. She was the outsider here, the prisoner given temporary freedom. Godric brought her dried meat and hard bread. Eat. Tomorrow will be harder. Clara ate mechanically, her jaw working against the tough meat. Around the fire, the guards talked quietly. About the journey ahead. About weather turning cold. About nothing of consequence. Arthur sat apart from them all, his back against a tree, his eyes fixed on the flames. Night fell completely, stars emerging overhead. Clara pulled her borrowed cloak tighter against the chill. Her body ached everywhere. "You should sleep while you can," one of the guards said, not unkindly. "The king will have us moving before dawn." Clara nodded and moved away from the fire, finding a spot near the edge of the clearing where she could rest against a tree trunk. She wrapped herself in her cloak and closed her eyes, willing sleep to come despite the cold. But sleep was slow. Her mind kept returning to the vision, to Isolde's dying face, the poison in her veins, the betrayal in her eyes. The whispered words about a child. She had not told Arthur that part. Had pulled back before she could reveal it. Because that secret felt too raw, too devastating to speak aloud in a dungeon cell with Godric listening. But she would have to tell him eventually. When they reached the tower, when she touched the stones where Isolde had died, she would see everything, and he would demand to know it all, including the truth about the child who had died with her. Clara must have dozed, because she jerked awake to find someone standing over her. Her heart hammered before she recognized the silhouette. "Arthur, you spoke in your sleep," he said quietly. His voice was rough, tired. "About betrayal. About people she trusted." Clara's mouth was dry. "It is what I saw in the vision." She knew, at the end, that someone close to her had done this. Arthur was silent for a long moment. Then he lowered himself to sit on the ground near her, his back against the same tree, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, but not touching. "Tell me about her. What you saw. Not just how she died, but who she was in those final moments." Clara closed her eyes, pulling up the memory. She was frightened, in terrible pain, but she was also angry. There was fire in her, even as the poison stole her strength. She fought until the very end, and her last thoughts were not of herself, but of you, of making sure you would know the truth. She was always like that, Arthur said, his voice barely above a whisper. Fierce, stubborn. She would argue with me about pack politics, about how I ruled, about everything. She was the only person in my life who was not afraid to tell me when I was wrong. He paused. I loved her for it. Clara opened her eyes and looked at him. In the starlight, his profile was sharp and beautiful, but there was such pain etched into his features that it hurt to see. What happened? Why was she in that tower? She was with child, Arthur said softly, and Clara's breath caught. I suspected it. The healer said she was weak and needed rest. She never told me. Perhaps she wanted to surprise me, but I felt it, Clara. I felt there was life growing inside her, 3 months along. The court physicians had advised rest, away from the stress of court. Lady Philippa suggested the northern tower, said the air would be good for her, that she would be safe and comfortable there. His jaw clenched. I believed them, believed that sending her away was protecting her and the babe. Instead, I sent her to her death. You could not have known, Clara said softly. I should have. Arthur's voice turned bitter. I am the Alpha King. It is my duty to protect what is mine. And I failed her. Failed our child. For 15 years, I have lived with that failure. But perhaps the true failure was letting guilt blind me when she needed me most. And now you tell me it was not illness that took her, but murder. That someone I trusted deliberately killed my mate and my heir. Clara's heart ached for him. For the young man he had been, barely 20 years old, losing everything. For the king he had become. Hard and cold, because the alternative was breaking under the weight of his grief. That is why we ride to the tower, she said. To find out who. To give you justice. Arthur turned his head to look at her, his golden eyes catching the starlight. And what do you want from this, Clara Winters? What do you gain by helping me? Clara met his gaze steadily. I want to prove that my gift is not a curse, that it can serve a purpose. And I want to survive. Those are the only things I have wanted for 7 years. Something shifted in Arthur's expression, softening just slightly. If you help me find the truth, if your visions lead to justice for Isolde, I will give you a place in this kingdom, a position in the court, protection under my rule. You will never have to wander alone again. Clara's throat tightened. And if I fail, then at least we both tried, Arthur said quietly. That is more than I have done for her in 15 years. He stood, brushing dirt from his clothes. Get some rest. Tomorrow we enter the deep forest. The Shadowlands lie beyond. And whatever truth waits in that tower, we will face it together. He walked back to his post by the fire, leaving Clara alone with her thoughts and the sound of wind through the pines. She pulled her cloak tighter and closed her eyes. But sleep was even more elusive now, because she had heard something in the Alpha King's voice that terrified her more than threats of death ever could. Hope, and hope, she had learned long ago, was the most dangerous thing a person could carry. Chapter 4. The Ruin's Truth. 4 days of hard riding brought them to the edge of the Shadowlands. The forest here was ancient, the trees so tall their tops disappeared into mist. The air tasted of old earth and decay, and even the horses grew nervous, ears flicking, nostrils flaring. Arthur called a halt. Beyond the tree line, the land grew wilder, darker. Clara could see the remains of an old road, overgrown with weeds and moss. We go on foot from here, Arthur said, dismounting. The horses will not enter. They sense what happened in this place. He gestured to 2 guards. Stay with the mounts. The rest, with me. Clara slid from her mare, legs stiff from days in the saddle. She accepted water from Godric, drinking deeply, then checked the wrappings on her wrists. The wounds had healed, leaving thin scars. They entered the forest in single file, Arthur leading, Clara behind him, Godric and the remaining guards following. The temperature dropped beneath the canopy. Clara pulled her cloak tighter, her breath misting. The silence was oppressive. No birdsong, no rustle of animals. Just the sound of their boots on the old road. How much further? Clara asked. Half a day, Arthur said without turning. The tower stands alone in a clearing. It was built centuries ago as a watchtower. Before my grandfather's time, it was abandoned. His voice was carefully neutral. It seemed perfect for someone who needed rest and isolation. Clara heard the bitterness beneath the words. They walked for hours. Finally, near midday, the trees thinned. Clara caught her first glimpse of the tower. It stood in the center of a clearing choked with dead grass and thorny vines. The structure was stone, gray, and weathered, perhaps 40 feet tall. Ivy covered most of the walls. The wooden door hung half off its hinges. Windows gaped empty and dark. Arthur stopped at the clearing's edge. His hands were fists at his sides, his jaw clenched. I came here once, he said, voice rough, after they told me she was dead. They said fever had taken her, that her body was too contagious to bring back. They burned her, they said, scattered her ashes. He turned to Clara, his golden eyes haunted. I stood in this clearing and felt nothing but emptiness. I never thought to question. You were grieving, Clara said softly. People in grief do not think clearly. I am the Alpha King, Arthur snapped. I do not have the luxury of clouded judgment. Godric stepped forward. Your Majesty, perhaps... No, Arthur cut him off. We came for truth. We will have it. He looked at Clara. Go. Do what you came to do. Clara took a breath and stepped into the clearing. The dead grass crunched beneath her boots. The air here felt wrong, tainted, as if the land itself remembered the evil done. The tower door hung open, revealing darkness. Clara approached slowly, her heart hammering. She could feel her wolf trembling, wanting to flee. She stepped through the doorway. Inside, the tower was hollow. The floors above had rotted away. Rubble littered the ground. A stone staircase spiraled up the wall, but many steps were missing. Clara began to climb. The stairs groaned beneath her weight. She tested each step carefully. Twice, stone crumbled, and she had to find another path. Behind her, Arthur followed, moving with sure-footedness. By the time Clara reached the top, her muscles were shaking. Her palms scraped raw. She pulled herself up onto the remaining floor. The room was circular, perhaps 15 feet across. The roof had partially caved in, letting in cold, gray light. A single window looked north over forest. The floor was stone, cracked and uneven. And in the center, Clara saw dark stains. Blood. 15 years old, faded, but visible. This was where Isolde had died. Clara knelt, hands shaking. She pressed her palms flat against the cold stone. The vision slammed into her with devastating force. She gasped, her body going rigid. The tower around her disappeared, replaced by memory burned into stone by a dying woman's anguish. Isolde was here, lying on a straw pallet, too weak to stand. Her red hair was dull with sweat, her skin pale as death. Her hands rested on her swollen belly, 3 months pregnant, protecting the child even as poison killed them both. A figure stood over her, Lady Philippa, younger but recognizable, her face cold and merciless. "Why?" Isolde whispered, barely audible. "We trusted you. Artur trusted you." "Exactly," Philippa said. "His trust makes him weak. You made him weak. A king does not need love, girl. He needs power, control. And an heir would have given him both. A direct line, no need for advisors, for the council. He would have ruled absolutely. I could not allow that. Monster!" Isolde breathed. "You murdered your king's child." "I saved the kingdom from tyranny," Philippa corrected. She turned toward the door. "The poison will finish its work by morning. I will send word that you died of fever. He will grieve, but he will move on. And I will ensure he rules as he should. Guided. Controlled." She left, and Isolde was alone. The young woman wept, tears falling silently. She crawled back to the pallet and lay down, hands on her belly, singing softly to the baby who would never draw breath. And as the poison stopped her heart, her last thought was his name, Artur. Clara came back to herself gasping, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking. She was aware of hands on her shoulders, steadying her. Artur, kneeling beside her, his face stark with fear and fury. "What did you see?" he demanded. "Tell me. Now." Clara could barely form words. "Philippa," she whispered. It was Philippa. She came to the tower. She told Isolde why. Said an heir would give you too much power. That she needed you controlled, guided by the council. Artur's face went white, then red. His eyes blazed gold. "Philippa murdered my mate, murdered my child, and I kept her at my side for 15 years. His voice rose to a roar. "I let her advise me. Let her stand at my right hand while she smiled and lied." His aura exploded outward, raw power that made the stones tremble. His body began to shift. Not fully, not yet. Artur was a king used to mastering even his beast, but this time control slipped like sand through his fingers. Godric stumbled back. The guards below cried out. Clara felt it crash over her, the rage and grief of an alpha king confronting ultimate betrayal. Artur surged to his feet, his body beginning to shift. Fur rippled across his skin, his eyes fully gold now, his teeth lengthening. He threw back his head and howled, a sound of such pure anguish that Clara felt it in her bones. She scrambled to her feet, her own grief mingling with his. Without thinking, operating on instinct alone, she reached out and touched his arm. The moment her fingers made contact, everything changed. A jolt ran through her, electric and overwhelming. She felt him. Not just his rage, but everything beneath it. The 20-year-old boy who had loved Isolde with his whole heart. The man who had tried to protect her and failed. The king who had lived 15 years in darkness. And beneath it all, buried so deep he might not even recognize it yet, she felt something else. A pull, a recognition, a bond beginning to form between them, fragile as spider silk, but undeniably real. The mate bond, starting to wake. Artur felt it too. She saw the moment he recognized what was happening. His eyes locked on hers, wide with shock, his partial transformation halting. For a heartbeat, they simply stared at each other, connected by something neither had asked for. Then Arthur wrenched away, breaking contact. He staggered back, breathing ragged. "No," he said. "No, not now. Not like this." Clara's hand fell to her side, still tingling. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I did not mean—" "It does not matter," Arthur cut her off. His voice was harsh, control fraying. He turned to Godric, who stood in the doorway, face pale. "We return to the castle. Now. We ride through the night if we must. I want Philippa arrested the moment we arrive. She is to be held in the deepest cell, under constant guard. No one speaks to her. No one. Am I understood?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Godric said immediately. Arthur looked at Clara once more, and in his eyes she saw a storm of emotion. Rage at Philippa, grief for Isolde and the child, confusion and something almost like fear about the bond that had just sparked between them. "You have given me truth," he said roughly. "For that, I am grateful. But do not expect more from me than I can give. Not now. Not when I have just learned that 15 years of my life have been built on lies and murder." He turned and descended the stairs, moving too fast, reckless. Godric followed, casting one last look at Clara. She stood alone in the tower room, her hand still tingling, her heart aching. She had accomplished what she came to do. Had given the Alpha King his answers, his justice, but in doing so, she had awakened something between them that neither was ready to face, and she wondered as she began the careful descent whether truth was always worth the price it demanded. Chapter 5. Shadows and Investigations. The journey back took 6 days instead of 4. The forest felt heavier, the group slower and more cautious. None wished to risk ambush or recklessness again. Arthur rode at a slower pace, his silence heavy and absolute. He did not speak to Clara, did not speak to anyone except to give commands about when to stop, when to move. He rode at the front, always, his back rigid, his eyes fixed ahead. Clara watched him, saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the reins too tight. He was processing the devastation of learning the truth about Isolde and their child, the betrayal of someone he had trusted for 15 years. And beneath it all, the awareness of the mate bond forming between them. On the 3rd night, Clara woke to find Arthur standing at the camp's edge, silhouetted against stars. She approached carefully. "You should not be alone with this pain," she said softly. Arthur did not turn. "I have been alone with pain for 15 years. A few more days will not break me." "That is a different kind of pain," Clara said. "Now you know it was murder, and the murderer has been at your side ever since. What would you know of it?" His voice was sharp. "I lost my family, my pack. Everyone I loved turned away from me because of what I am. I know what it means to be betrayed by those who should have protected you." Arthur was silent. Then quietly, he said, "I should have protected her. That was my duty. And I failed." "You were deceived," Clara said. "Philippa manipulated you. That does not make you weak." Arthur finally turned to look at her. In the moonlight, his golden eyes were dull with grief. "And what of this bond between us?" Clara's breath caught. "I do not know. I have never had a mate bond before." Godric, who had been silent until then, spoke in a low, reverent tone. "Legends say that when a true bond is broken by death, and love remains pure, the goddess may grant a second connection, not to replace what was lost, but to heal what was left behind." For a moment, the weight in the room seemed lighter. "It should not be possible," Arthur said. "Isolde was my mate. How can there be another? Perhaps the goddess does not intend for you to live alone forever," Clara said carefully. Arthur's jaw clenched. "Do not presume to know what Isolde would want. You are right. I am sorry." She turned to walk away, but his voice stopped her. "Clara, I am not ready. I may never be ready, but I will not punish you for what you did not choose. It was not acceptance, but it was something." They reached the castle on the 6th day. Arthur's mask was perfect. He rode through the gates with his head high, expression cold and controlled. Lady Philippa was there to greet him, her smile warm. "Your Majesty, welcome home. I trust your journey was successful." "It was enlightening," Arthur said, his voice giving nothing away. but tiring. I will rest tonight and attend to court business tomorrow. He dismounted. Lady Philippa, please ensure our guest is given proper accommodations. Clara Winters has been of service to the crown. Philippa's eyes flickered to Clara, surprise and suspicion warring on her face. Of course, Your Majesty. See to it personally, Arthur commanded. Clara was given a small but comfortable room in the castle's east wing. Not the dungeons, but not the guest quarters either. Clean clothes, a proper bed, and freedom to move within certain areas. But the door had a guard stationed outside. The next morning, Godric came to her room. The king has given you a task. You are to help me investigate Lady Philippa. Quietly, we need evidence for the Council of Alphas. Your visions alone will not be enough. We need documents, witnesses, proof. They worked for 3 weeks. Clara used her gift on objects from Philippa's chambers. A quill that showed her writing letters to a rival alpha. A ring that revealed a conversation about poison. A hairbrush that carried memories of Philippa's satisfaction watching Arthur grieve. During those weeks, Clara spent long hours in the castle library with Godric, poring over old records. And sometimes, late at night, Arthur would come. He never announced himself. Would simply appear in the doorway, watching them work. The first time, Clara had frozen, unsure, but he had only nodded and walked to a shelf, pulling down a ledger. This was the year she died. He said quietly, "Look at the expenditures for the Northern Territories. See if anything seems unusual." And he had stayed, working alongside them in silence. It happened gradually. Arthur's presence became regular. He would come after dark and work with them until dawn threatened. He did not speak much, but his silence was no longer hostile. It was the silence of someone processing, healing in small increments. One night, after 2 weeks, Clara found a discrepancy. Here, a payment to a merchant for medicinal supplies. But the amount is far too high for what was purchased. Arthur leaned over her shoulder to look, and Clara became intensely aware of his proximity. She could smell pine in winter storms, could feel the heat of his body. "Who authorized the payment?" Arthur asked. "Philippa," Godric said, checking the signature. "She handled all supply requisitions that year." "And the merchant?" "Long dead," Godric said grimly. "Convenient. But it was a thread." They pulled at it, and slowly a pattern emerged. Payments to people who later died. Correspondence with those who stood to gain from instability. Small pieces that together painted a picture of conspiracy. It was during the 3rd week that Clara finally acknowledged what was growing between her and Arthur. He had stayed late, helping her translate an old document. Their hands had touched as they reached for the same page, and the mate bond had pulsed, stronger now. They had both pulled back, but not before Clara felt it, the connection deepening. "I feel it too," Arthur said quietly. "The bond. It grows stronger every day." He looked at her, his golden eyes conflicted. "I told myself I would resist, but I cannot, and I do not know if that makes me a traitor to Isolde's memory, or simply a man tired of being alone." Clara's throat tightened. "I think it makes you human. Even Alpha Kings are allowed to grieve and to heal." "Are they?" Arthur's smile was bitter. "I am not sure I know how." Before Clara could respond, the library door opened. An old man in priest's robes entered, his face lined with age and fear. "Father Oswin." "Your Majesty," he said, his voice trembling. "Forgive the intrusion, but I can no longer remain silent." He pulled a leather satchel from beneath his robes. "I have kept these hidden for 15 years. Lady Philippa discovered that I knew of her crime. She threatened my family, my grandchildren, but I am old now, and they are grown, and far from her reach. I can no longer let an innocent woman's murder go unavenged." He opened the satchel and pulled out documents. Letters in Philippa's hand, discussing payment for poison. A journal from a dead counselor confessing his part. Financial records matching what Clara and Godric had found. "This is everything," Oswin said. "Everything needed to prove her guilt." Arthur took the documents with shaking hands. His face went white, then red with rage. "Why did you not come forward before?" "Because I was a coward," Oswin said simply. and because I did not think anyone would believe a simple priest over the king's most trusted advisor. But now you have your seer, your evidence. Now the truth can be told." Before any of them could respond, the library door burst open. 5 men in dark clothing rushed in, blades drawn. Assassins. "Down!" Godric roared, drawing his sword. Clara dove behind a table as steel clashed. One assassin lunged for Arthur, a silver blade aimed at his heart. Arthur shifted partially, his eyes blazing gold, and caught the man's wrist, snapping it. But another assassin had circled behind, blade raised. Clara saw it happening in slow motion. The blade descending toward Arthur's unprotected back. She did not think. She grabbed a heavy candelabra and threw herself forward, smashing it into the assassin's face. He stumbled backward, and Arthur spun, his claws extended, and tore out the man's throat. But a third assassin had reached Clara. His blade flashed down, and she tried to dodge, but she was too slow. The silver cut deep into her shoulder, and she screamed, falling to her knees as fire burned through her veins. Arthur roared, a sound of pure fury and fear. He killed the remaining assassins with brutal efficiency, then dropped to his knees beside Clara, his hands hovering over her wound. "Clara," he said, his voice breaking. "Clara, stay with me." The last thing Clara saw before darkness claimed her was his face above hers, twisted with fear, and something that looked terrifyingly close to love. Chapter 6. The Bond Sealed. Clara woke to pain. It radiated from her shoulder in waves of fire, silver poisoning burning through her veins. She tried to move and gasped, her vision blurring. "Do not move." Arthur's voice, rough with exhaustion. The healers removed the blade, but the silver went deep. "You need to rest." Clara blinked, her vision clearing slowly. She was in a large chamber, firelight casting warm shadows on stone walls. This was not her small room in the east wing. This was grander, richer. The bed beneath her was soft, covered in furs, and beside her, sitting in a chair pulled close, was Arthur. He looked terrible. His black hair was disheveled, dark circles under his golden eyes, his jaw shadowed with stubble. His clothes were stained with blood, her blood. "How long?" Clara's voice was barely a whisper. 2 days, Arthur said. "The healers said you might not wake. Silver poisoning in an omega is often fatal." His jaw clenched. "I did not let them give up on you." Clara tried to process this. 2 days. The assassins? Dead. All 5. Arthur leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. They were Philippa's. We found messages on their bodies, orders to kill anyone who discovered the documents. She knew. Somehow she knew we were closing in. "Oswin? Safe. I have him under guard in the temple. He will testify when the time comes." Arthur's eyes met hers, and Clara saw something raw in his gaze. "You saved my life. That assassin would have killed me if you had not intervened." "I could not let him," Clara said simply. "The bond would not let me." Arthur was silent for a long moment. Then he stood and moved to sit on the edge of the bed, close enough that Clara could feel the heat of him, see the exhaustion and fear still lingering in his eyes. "I sat here for 2 days," he said quietly, "watching you fight the poison, listening to your heart struggle to beat. And I realized something." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "I realized that I could not lose you. Not now. Not when the goddess has given me a second chance at something I thought was gone forever." Clara's breath caught. "Arthur, you are my second mate, Clara Winters," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I feel the bond. It has been growing since the moment you touched me in that tower. I fought it because I felt like I was betraying Isolde. But these past 2 days, watching you lie here barely breathing, I understood something. Isolde would not want me to spend the rest of my life alone and empty. She would want me to live, to love again, to be happy." Tears burned Clara's eyes. "I am not her. I can never be what she was to you." "No," Arthur agreed. "You are not her. You are yourself, brave and stubborn and stronger than you know. You survived 7 years alone. You stood before me in that throne room and spoke truth when it could have meant your death. You threw yourself between me and a blade without hesitation. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. You are exactly who the goddess meant for me to find, and I am done fighting it. Clara's heart hammered in her chest. What are you saying? I am saying that I want this bond, Arthur said. I want you, if you will have me. Clara stared at him, at this powerful king who had ruled with iron control for 15 years, now looking at her with vulnerability and hope. I am an Omega with no pack, no family, no status. You are the Alpha King. How could this possibly work? I am the Alpha King, Arthur said, a hint of his old arrogance creeping into his voice. I decide what works and what does not. And I have decided that you belong at my side. If you want to be there. Clara knew she should hesitate, should consider the implications, the danger, the impossibility of it all. But she had learned long ago that life was too short and too cruel to waste time on fear. Yes, she whispered. I want this. I want you. Arthur's eyes blazed gold. He leaned in slowly, carefully, mindful of her injury. When his lips met hers, it was gentle at first. A question, Clara answered by reaching up with her good arm, threading her fingers through his hair, and pulling him closer. The kiss deepened. The mate bond flared between them, stronger than before, sealing something fundamental. Clara felt it like a rush of warmth through her body, Arthur's essence twining with hers, creating a connection that went deeper than flesh, deeper than thought. This was soul deep, permanent. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Clara saw that Arthur's eyes had tears in them. I can feel you, he said, his voice rough with wonder. In here. He pressed a hand to his chest. I can feel what you feel. Your pain, your exhaustion, but also your happiness, your acceptance of me. The bond, Clara whispered. It is sealed, partially. Partially. Arthur's eyebrow rose. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. Full bond requires more. Understanding dawned in Arthur's eyes, followed by heat. You are injured. I am healing, Clara said. Shifters heal fast. And I have waited 7 years for someone to look at me the way you are looking at me right now. I do not want to wait any longer. Arthur's smile was slow and dangerous. Then we will not wait. He was careful with her, mindful of her wounded shoulder. But the mate bond demanded completion, and neither of them had the strength to resist. When they came together, it was with the certainty of souls recognizing their other half. The bond sealed completely, a rush of power and connection that left them both shaking in its wake. Afterward, Clara lay curled against Arthur's chest, his arm around her waist, listening to his heartbeat, slow. She felt complete in a way she had never experienced. The emptiness that had haunted her since her pack rejected her was gone, filled by the presence of this man, this mate, this impossible gift. I will mark you formally, Arthur said quietly. Tomorrow, before the court. Let everyone know that you are mine and under my protection. Philippa will not accept this quietly, Clara warned. No, Arthur agreed grimly. She will not. He was right. The next morning, before Arthur could make any formal announcement, Philippa struck. Clara was helping the healers change the bandages on her shoulder when guards burst into the chamber. Lady Clara Winters, the captain said, his face apologetic. I am commanded by the Council of Alphas to place you under arrest. Clara's blood ran cold. On what charge? Witchcraft and manipulation of the Alpha King through dark magic, the captain said. Lady Philippa has brought evidence before the council. They demand a formal trial. Arthur appeared in the doorway, his face thunderous. On whose authority? The council's, your majesty, the captain said, bowing his head. Lady Philippa has invoked the ancient law. When a king's judgment is questioned by his advisors, the council must investigate. They have sworn testimony from 3 witnesses who claim they saw the accused performing ritual magic. They have documentation of her family's history of dark arts, and they have demanded formal trial by the full council. Arthur's aura exploded outward, making the guards stumble back. This is madness. Clara is innocent. She is my mate. which Lady Philippa claims is proof of the enchantment, the captain said miserably. She argues that no Alpha King would mate an outcast Omega without supernatural manipulation. She has half the council convinced, Your Majesty. If you refuse the trial, it will look like confirmation that you are compromised. Arthur's jaw clenched. Clara could feel his rage through the bond, but also his calculation. He was trapped. If he refused the trial, he would lose legitimacy. The council might even move to depose him. But if he allowed it, Clara would be at the mercy of a system Philippa had spent weeks manipulating. When? Arthur bit out. 3 days hence, Your Majesty. In the Great Hall. All alphas of the kingdom are summoned to witness. Arthur's eyes met Clara's across the chamber. This is not over, he said. And Clara felt the promise through the bond. I will not lose you. I know, Clara said softly, because now, with the bond complete, she could feel his determination as clearly as her own heartbeat. But as the guards led her away, not roughly but firmly, Clara felt fear curl in her stomach, because Philippa was desperate now, and desperate people were the most dangerous of all. She was placed in a cell, but a comfortable one. A bed, a window with bars, clean clothes and regular meals. Not a prisoner exactly, but not free either. A guest under house arrest, pending trial. The trial that would determine whether she lived or died, and whether Arthur would be strong enough to save her when Philippa had spent 15 years learning exactly how to manipulate the council that was supposed to serve him. Chapter 7. Trial and Vengeance. 3 days passed too quickly. Clara spent them alone in her cell, save for brief visits from healers. The silver burn had healed enough that she could move her arm without agony. Through the mate bond, she felt Arthur constantly. His rage, his fear, his determination. On the morning of the trial, guards came to escort her. They dressed her in simple white, the color of the accused. Her hair was left loose, no adornment. She was meant to look small, vulnerable. But Clara had survived 7 years alone. She was not easy to dismiss. The great hall was packed. Every alpha in the kingdom had answered the summons. The last time Clara had entered this hall, she had been on her knees, bound and afraid. Now she walked with her head high. Still accused, yes, but carrying a truth powerful enough to shake a kingdom. The Council of Alphas sat in a semicircle before the throne. 12 powerful wolves, whose combined authority could check even a king. And at the center, on his black stone throne, sat Arthur. His face was a mask of cold control, but through the bond, Clara felt the storm inside him. Lady Philippa stood before the council, her expression sorrowful. My lords, I bring these charges with a heavy heart, but the safety of our kingdom demands truth. Clara was brought to stand in the center of the hall. She lifted her chin and met Arthur's eyes across the distance. Through the bond, she felt his promise. I am with you. Clara Winters, the head of the council, Alpha Aldrich, spoke with a voice like distant thunder. You stand accused of witchcraft, of using dark magic to manipulate the Alpha King into an unnatural mate bond. How do you answer? I deny them completely, Clara said clearly. I am a seer, yes. I have the gift of reading memories through touch. But that is not witchcraft. It is a bloodline ability, rare but documented. As for manipulating the Alpha King, that is impossible. Mate bonds cannot be forced or faked. They are granted by the goddess herself. So you claim, Philippa said smoothly. But we have witnesses who saw you performing rituals in the forest. 3 shifters stepped forward, describing seeing Clara at midnight, chanting in unknown languages, burning herbs and spilling blood. It was lies, all of it, but they spoke with conviction. I have never performed any such ritual, Clara said. I am not a witch. I am simply a woman who found evidence of a 15-year-old murder. Convenient, Philippa said, that you discovered this supposed murder just as you needed the king's protection, and that the person you accused just happened to be me. The murder is not supposed, Arthur said, his voice cutting through the hall. It is fact. I have seen the evidence, documents, testimony, financial records, all pointing to Lady Philippa orchestrating my mate's death. Evidence brought forth by this accused witch, Philippa countered. evidence that could easily be fabricated by someone with her supposed gifts. It was clever. Philippa was using Clara's own gift against her. These accusations require proof, Aldrich said. Lady Philippa, what evidence do you present? Philippa pulled out documents. Records she claimed showed Clara's family history of dark magic. Testimony from Clara's home pack calling her cursed. It was all taken out of context, twisted, but effective. Clara felt the council shifting, doubt creeping in. I would like to present evidence, Clara said. Not just visions, but logic. Lady Philippa claims I fabricated evidence to manipulate the king. But consider the timeline. I was arrested for trespassing before I ever spoke to His Majesty. I was sentenced to death. I had no reason to believe speaking Isolde's name would save me. Why would I risk that if I were simply trying to manipulate my way into power? Several alphas nodded. The logic was sound. Furthermore, Clara continued, Lady Philippa claims no alpha king would mate an outcast omega without supernatural manipulation. But she ignores the mate bond itself. Your Majesty, would you tell the council what you feel through our bond? Arthur's eyes met hers. I feel your fear, your determination, your certainty that you speak truth. The mate bond does not lie. It is soul deep. I know her heart as I know my own. Pretty words, Philippa said. But if she has enchanted you, you would not know the difference. Then let me speak. Father Oswin stepped forward. The old priest looked small and frail, but his voice was firm. I have kept silent for too long, but I can remain silent no longer. He placed a leather satchel before the council. These are records I have hidden for 15 years. Correspondence between Lady Philippa and those who benefited from Isolde's death. Financial transactions showing payment for rare poisons, and a journal from Councillor Marcus, who died 10 years ago, confessing his part and naming Lady Philippa as the architect. The council examined the documents with growing shock and anger. Philippa's face went pale, then red. Those are forgeries. The priest is old, senile, manipulated. I am not senile, Oswin said with dignity. And these documents bear seals that cannot be forged. Aldrich held up one of the letters. This seal is genuine. I recognize Councillor Marcus's hand. These financial records match entries in the royal ledgers. He looked at Philippa with cold fury. You have much to answer for. Philippa's composure finally cracked. You fools. Everything I did was for the good of the kingdom. Isolde would have given Arthur an heir, a direct line of succession. He would have ruled absolutely, with no checks on his power. I prevented tyranny. You murdered my mate, Arthur said, his voice deadly quiet. You murdered my child. You stole 15 years of my life and filled them with lies. I saved the kingdom, Philippa spat, and I would do it again. She pulled a dagger from her robes and lunged toward Clara, but Godric intercepted, his sword flashing. Steel rang against steel. Guards! Philippa screamed. Kill the witch! Kill them all! Half the guards revealed themselves as traitors, drawing weapons. The great hall exploded into chaos. Shifters transformed, wolves filling the space with snarls. Stone cracked under claws. Clara dove behind a pillar as a blade whistled past. She saw Arthur transform fully, his black wolf magnificent and terrifying, tearing through traitors. Godric fought at his side, his experience showing in every move. An enemy wolf lunged at Clara. She grabbed broken wood from a shattered bench and drove it into the wolf's eye. The creature howled and stumbled back. Across the hall, she saw Father Oswin being protected by loyal guards. One of the traitor guards reached him, blade raised. Clara threw herself forward, grabbing a fallen sword. It was heavy, awkward, but she swung with all her strength. The blade caught the traitor's arm, making him drop his weapon. A loyal guard finished him. The battle raged for minutes that felt like hours. Slowly, the loyal forces gained the upper hand. Philippa fought her way toward the door, killing anyone in her path. But Arthur pursued her, his black wolf moving impossibly fast. He drove her back, up the stairs toward the tower. Clara followed, her stolen sword still in hand. She reached the tower room to find Arthur in human form again. Philippa backed against the window, a dagger in her shaking hand. It should have worked, Philippa hissed. I controlled you for 15 years. You never controlled me, Artur said coldly. You manipulated a grieving boy. But that boy is dead, and the man who stands before you will see justice done. Justice? Philippa laughed bitterly. You call it justice when you are blinded by that Omega witch? I call it justice, Clara said from the doorway. When a murderer answers for her crimes. Philippa's eyes flickered between them. Then she smiled, cruel. You think you have won, but you will never escape my shadow. Every time you look at that Omega, you will remember that she is not Isolde. No, Artur agreed. She is not Isolde. She is Clara. She is my second mate. And she is 10 times the woman you ever were. He moved faster than Philippa could react. His hand closed around her throat, lifting her off the ground. For Isolde. For my child. For 15 years of lies. His claws extended, piercing skin. You will never hurt anyone I love again. With a swift, brutal motion, he snapped her neck. Philippa's body went limp. Artur dropped her, letting her fall to the stone floor. Clara moved to Artur's side. Through the bond, she felt his satisfaction, his grief, his relief. It was over. The kingdom is yours again, Clara said softly. Truly yours. Artur turned to her, his golden eyes still burning. No, the kingdom is ours. If you will stand with me. Clara took his blood-stained hand in hers. Always. And in that tower room, where so much pain had begun, they sealed their commitment with a kiss that tasted of victory and new beginnings. Chapter 8. New Beginnings. 2 months had passed since the battle in the Great Hall. 2 months since Philippa's death and the purge of traitors from the court. 2 months since Clara had stood beside Artur and claimed her place as his mate before the entire kingdom. The castle had been transformed. Where once there had been whispers and shadows, now there was openness and light. The Council of Alphas had been restructured, corrupt members removed, and honest wolves appointed in their place. Artur ruled with a strength tempered by wisdom. No longer the cold, distant king Philippa had shaped him to be, and Clara stood at his side. No longer the outcast Omega, but the Alpha King's mate, respected and valued for her gift and her courage. But today was not about politics or power. Today was about memory and healing. Clara stood in the castle cemetery, watching as workers placed the final stone, a memorial for Isolde and the child who had died with her. Made from white marble quarried from the northern mountains, it showed a woman with flowing hair holding a baby. Simple, elegant, heartbreaking. Artur stood beside Clara, his hand in hers. She felt his grief through the bond, still raw after all these years, but no longer consuming. He had learned to carry it, to honor what he had lost without letting it destroy what he had found. It is beautiful, Clara said softly. She deserves to be remembered, Artur said. They both do. Not as a forbidden subject, not as a source of shame, but as the innocent victims of a woman's ambition. He squeezed Clara's hand. Thank you for giving me the truth, for giving me the chance to honor them properly. The ceremony was held that afternoon. The entire court attended, along with alphas from across the kingdom. Father Oswin, who had survived the battle with only minor injuries, led the prayers. He spoke of love and loss, of justice finally served, of the importance of remembering those who had been taken too soon. Clara stood with Artur as he spoke to the assembled crowd. His voice was steady, his words honest. He told them about Isolde, about the young woman she had been, about the love they had shared. He told them about the child they had never met, the heir who had been murdered before taking their first breath. And he told them about Philippa's betrayal, about the 15 years of lies and manipulation. I failed Isolde, Artur said, his golden eyes sweeping the crowd. I let my grief blind me. I let the woman who killed her stand at my side and influence my rule. But I will not fail her memory. From this day forward, this kingdom will be different. We will value truth over convenience. We will protect the vulnerable instead of exploiting them. And we will never forget the price of unchecked ambition. The crowd bowed their heads in respect. When the ceremony ended, people came forward one by one to lay flowers at the memorial. Clara watched them come, watched the kingdom mourn properly for the queen they had lost too soon. Godric approached them, his expression solemn. "It was well done, Your Majesty. Isolde would have approved." "I hope so," Arthur said quietly. Then he turned to Clara. "Come. There is something I want to show you." He led her through the castle to the east wing, to a series of rooms that had been closed for weeks. Guards opened the doors, revealing spaces that had been completely renovated. Clean, bright, filled with beds and supplies. "What is this?" Clara asked. "A sanctuary," Arthur said. "For shifters who have been rejected by their packs. For those with gifts that mark them as different. For omegas without protection. For anyone who needs a safe place to heal and find their strength." He looked at her, his golden eyes warm. "You told me once that your gift could serve a purpose. This is it. You will lead this sanctuary. Help those who are lost the way you once were. Turn your pain into something that saves others." Clara's throat tightened with emotion. "Arthur, I do not know what to say." "Say yes," he said simply. "Say you will help me build something better." "Yes," Clara whispered. "Of course, yes." He pulled her close, careful of her still healing shoulder, and kissed her forehead. Through the bond, she felt his love, his pride, his absolute certainty that they were building something worth protecting. That evening, in their private chambers, Clara finally told him the news she had been keeping close. "I am pregnant," she said quietly. Arthur froze, his eyes going wide. "What?" 2 months along," Clara said, her hand moving to her still flat stomach. "I felt it through the bond before the healers confirmed it. We conceived the night we sealed the bond completely." For a long moment, Arthur simply stared at her. Then he dropped to his knees before her, his hands covering hers on her stomach. Through the bond, Clara felt his joy, his fear, his overwhelming emotion threatening to break through his control. "I lost one child," he said, his voice rough. "I will not lose another. I will protect you both with everything I am." "I know," Clara said, running her fingers through his black hair. "I can feel it. The bond does not lie." Arthur stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "You have given me everything," he whispered. "Truth, justice, love, and now a child. A future I thought was dead and buried. We gave it to each other," Clara corrected. "I was nothing when I came here. You gave me purpose, protection, belonging. We saved each other." They stood together in the quiet of their chambers, the mate bond thrumming between them, alive with promise and potential. The weeks that followed were busy. Clara threw herself into establishing the sanctuary, working with healers and counselors to create a place where the rejected and outcast could find acceptance. The first arrivals were hesitant, scarred by their experiences, but slowly they began to trust. Clara used her gift to help them process their traumas, to see the memories that haunted them, and learn to carry them without being crushed. Arthur reformed the council, creating laws that protected omegas and limited the power of advisors to manipulate the throne. He traveled to packs across the kingdom, rebuilding relationships that Philippa's influence had damaged. Slowly, the kingdom began to heal. On a crisp autumn morning, 4 months after Philippa's death, Clara stood on the castle ramparts looking out over the kingdom. Her pregnancy was visible now, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her stomach. She could feel the child moving inside her, strong and healthy. Arthur joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hand covering hers on her stomach. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we have come," Clara said. 6 months ago I was alone and desperate, breaking into forbidden archives just to find some scrap of information about who I am. Now I am here, carrying the heir to the kingdom, leading a sanctuary, standing beside the Alpha King as his mate. It feels unreal. It is very real, Arthur said, pressing a kiss to her neck. And it is only the beginning. Our child will grow up in a kingdom that values truth and justice. They will never know the pain of rejection or the weight of lies. We will make sure of it. Will you tell them about Isolde? Clara asked softly. About their older sibling who never got to live? Yes, Arthur said without hesitation. They deserve to know their history, all of it. The good and the bad, Isolde was part of my life, and I will never pretend otherwise. But they will also know that I love you, that you are my mate and my partner in all things. There is room in my heart for both the past and the future. Clara turned in his arms, looking up at his face. The golden eyes that had once looked at her with cold suspicion now gazed at her with warmth and love. The scar through his eyebrow gave him a roguish look, but she had learned the man beneath the exterior. Fierce, loyal, capable of great love and equally great vengeance. I love you, she said. I know I do not say it enough. You do not need to say it, Arthur replied, touching his forehead to hers. I feel it every moment through the bond. But it is still good to hear. I love you, Clara repeated, smiling. And I am grateful every day that I found that medallion, that I had the courage to speak Isolde's name, that the goddess guided me to you. As am I, Arthur said. You are the greatest gift I never knew I needed. They stood together on the ramparts as the sun climbed higher, painting the kingdom in shades of gold. Below them, the castle bustled with life. Clara looked out over the horizon and thought of everything it had taken to reach this moment. Pain, loss, courage, and love. Truth had come at a cost, but now the kingdom bloomed upon the ruins of its lies. Sometimes, she thought, the past had to break so the future could finally breathe. In the sanctuary, rejected shifters were finding hope. In the Great Hall, the Reformed Council worked to build a better future. In the cemetery, fresh flowers lay at Isolde's memorial, proof that she was remembered and honored. And in Clara's womb, a new life grew, the heir to a kingdom rebuilt on truth instead of lies, on love instead of manipulation, on hope instead of fear. The past would never be forgotten. Isolde and the child who died with her would always be part of their story, mourned and honored. But the future stretched ahead, full of possibility and promise. Clara had come to the castle as a prisoner condemned to die. She had survived to become a queen in all but name, loved and respected by a man who had been broken and made whole again. And as Arthur pulled her close, his hand protective over their growing child, Clara knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The goddess had guided her through darkness to find light, through rejection to find acceptance, through loss to find love, and she would spend the rest of her life proving herself worthy of that gift. The end.